Key West, Florida. In the 1930s. Population is 12,470. Prohibition era is ending. And the Great Depression is beginning. The radio was becoming a staple in many American homes. There was major buzz about the newest technology that was about to revolutionize the world, the television set. More than 4 million people are unemployed as a result of the Wall Street crash of 1929. World War II is looming and economic times are rough and political tension is high. Our story begins at the Marine Hospital in Key West, Florida. 22-year-old Maria Elena Milagro Hoyos, called Elena, was feeling ill, and her family brought her to the hospital for some tests. She meets Carl Tanzler, a radiologic technician. Elena was diagnosed with tuberculosis. Suffers of the infectious disease that typically attacks the lungs, had an average of 3 years to live. Cuban-American beauty and the daughter of a local cigar maker named Francisco Hoyos and his wife, Aurora. Maria Elena had a bit of a tragic life. She had a sister who died from tuberculosis and a brother-in-law who was electrocuted on a construction site. Soon after she was married, she miscarried. Her husband abandoned her and moved to Miami. She was struggling at such a young age with the misfortune of a terminal diagnosis and was mostly likely focusing on coping with her mortality rather than looking to fall in love with a creepy radiologist 32 years her elder. Radiologists would interpret the X-ray images to identify any signs of tuberculosis and collaborate with other healthcare professionals, such as physicians and specialists. Carl Tanzler must have leached on to Elena and her family as they desperately searched for medical help in hopes of a miracle and to save young Elena from tuberculosis, which was considered a death sentence in those times. When Elena visited the hospital for her tuberculosis screening, the Carl was in search of his soulmate. He later claimed that, as a child, he was visited by visions of a dead ancestor, Countess Anna Constantia von Kozel, who revealed to him the face of his true love, an exotic dark-haired woman. He was convinced the vision had been of Elena. This was their first meeting, and he immediately fell in love. Although not actually a doctor, Tanzler was determined to save Hoyos. With her family's approval, he tried out different remedies. Many sources describe the concoctions as potions and tinctures. Tanzler also administered painful treatments using a device that included electrodes. At one point, Elena's family grew tired of Tanzler's obvious obsession and radical treatments and behavior and banned him from being around or treating sick Elena. As her condition worsened and the infectious disease spread throughout her family and the desperation grew. And through Tanzler's obsession-fueled persistence and delusional motivations, the family apprehensively accepted treatment. As he desperately tried to save Hoyos, Tanzi reportedly showered her with gifts and told Hoyos that he loved her. However, Hoyos made it clear that she was not interested. Despite Tanzler's treatments, Hoyos died on October 25, 1931. Tanzler insisted on paying for her funeral, complete with a large mausoleum. Some believe he poisoned her, and based on life expectancy for tuberculosis during that time, she died prematurely. Based on his personality and level of mental illness, it wouldn't be hard to conceive he planned to have her corpse as his companion. Her family consented but weren't aware that Tanzler alone had a key to the mausoleum. Elena Hoyos was embalmed and interred in the Key West cemetery. His obsession turned sick and sadistic. Tanzler visited Hoyos' grave nightly. He left gifts and even had a telephone installed in her tomb. He continued his visits with Hoyos for the next 2 years. During this period, Tanzler was fired from his job at the hospital for unknown reasons. Over the following 2 years, Tanzler's behavior became increasingly unusual. Those who knew him became suspicious. He was seen purchasing women's clothing and perfumes. A young neighbor saw him dancing with what appeared to be a life-size doll through Tanzler's window. He stopped visiting Hoyos' grave. Rumors spread that Tanzler was living with Hoyos' corpse. In 1940, this rumor reached the ears of Hoyos' sister, Florinda, who then decided to visit Tanzler. Tanzler willingly showed Florinda Elena's body. Florinda thought that what she saw was an effigy Tanzler made of her sister. However, it was later discovered that it was actually her corpse. Tanzler admitted that he broke into de Hoyos' tomb in April of 1933 and used a toy wagon to transport her body back to his house. Over the next 7 years, Tanzler worked hard to preserve her body as best as he could. He used coat hangers, wires, and stuffed her torso with rags. He used plaster of Paris to reconstruct her face, which he touched up with mortician's wax. He replaced her eyes with glass ones. After her hair fell out, Tanzler made a makeshift wig which he stapled to her head. Tanzler used Hoyos' real hair, some of which her mother gave to Tanzler after her death. To cover the smell of decay, he used a lot of perfume, flowers, disinfectants, and preserving agents. He filled her cadaver with rags so that she could keep her original form, and he dressed Elena in her own clothing, stockings, jewelry, and gloves. Tanzler did keep Hoyos in his bed, dressed up, complete with jewelry. When Tanzler took Hoyos' remains home, he restored her in a makeshift laboratory that he built. This laboratory was built in the shape of an airplane, which Tanzler called Elena's airship. Tanzler's plan was eventually to use the plane to bring Hoyos back to life. According to All That's Interesting, Tanzler thought that he could fly her high into the stratosphere so that radiation from outer space could penetrate her tissues and restore life to her somnolent form. Tanzler was deemed fit to stand trial after a psychiatric evaluation. He was charged with destroying a grave and removing a body without authorization. However, the charges were dropped since the statute of limitations expired. What was more disturbing was that after his arrest, the public's reaction was sympathetic. The case drew the attention of South Florida newspapers, and it created a sensation among the public, both regionally and across the country. By all accounts, Tanzler wasn't viewed with disdain but pity. He was seen as a lonely eccentric. Elena's body was examined by pathologists and then put on public display at the Dean Lopez Funeral Home in Key West, where it was seen by nearly 7,000 people. Elena's corpse was eventually returned to the Key West Cemetery and was reburied in an unmarked grave, in a secret location, to prevent any further tampering. Tanzler passed away in 1952. Tanzler had a life-size doll of Hoyos with him at the time of his death. No one knows what finally pushed Tanzler over the edge, but it's believed that he heard Elena calling to him from her grave, asking him to free her from her stone prison. He later stated that Elena's spirit appeared to him when he sat next to her tomb and serenaded her with her favorite song. July 31, 1909, marks the birthdate of Maria Elena Milagro de Hoyos. Poor Elena, who had the double misfortune of contracting a life-ending disease and meeting a sick and sadistic Carl Tanzler who would abduct and defile her human remains after her untimely death. Elena could find no peace in death until Tanzler died himself. It would have been appropriate to have mummified his corpse and paraded in a museum for all to see.